Welcome everyone to the Mint House. If this is your first time at one of our events or you have been to one of our events before, it's really, really great to see you here. This is, I think, the third event we've done online now rather than in person, but it's so great to see so many of you here, especially those who aren't from the Oxford area who otherwise wouldn't be able to join us today. Particularly, I know we've had some messages and people from the chat of people who are from North America, from Canada, various places like that. So really great to see you all here. Thank you so much for joining us. We're really, really excited today to have Amanda and Kristina here. Amanda Oates, who is the Executive Director of Workforce at Mersey Care NHS Foundation Trust. I think that's the right details. And Dr. Kristina Brown, who's a Senior Lecturer at Newcastle Business School at Northumbria University. So they're going to be sharing with us today a little bit of the story of what has happened in recent years at Mersey Care. And so the restorative approach that they've taken. So we're really excited to hear about that. I first heard about what was going on at Mersey Care earlier this year. I think they might mention it later, but there's a short documentary called Just Culture, the movie, which I watched, which I thought was really interesting, really inspirational. And then came across some of the research that had also been done on the same sort of topics, and just thought it'd be something really, really interesting for us all to learn from and to think about a real world example of how restorative approaches, just culture, restorative justice can be used in a real life setting, in a practical setting, a workplace setting. So yeah, really great to have Amanda and Kristina here. Kristina, do you say you were going to try to share your screen with the slides? Do you want to try doing that?
Yeah, let me just do that now.
And then I'll hand over to you and Amanda to kick us off.
Okay.
Amanda, I think you're muted now, so if you, I'll mute myself so I don't get in the way. But yeah, wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah, please go on.
Can you all see that okay?
Yeah, thanks, Kristina. So good afternoon, everybody. Really, really pleased to be able to join the Mint House this afternoon, and Kristina and I will take you through a high-level journey that we've been on at Mersey Care, and then hopefully at the end we've got the opportunity for some questions. I'd really encourage you, as both Kristina and I are talking, to ask any questions using the chat box, or I will also ask you to reference and reflect and maybe share some things in the chat box if colleagues are willing to do so. So my name's Amanda Oates, as Joy has kindly introduced me already. I'm going to start off sharing with you a little bit about Mersey Care, what we are and who we do, and then we'll hand over to Kristina, take you through some slides about just culture, and then we'll get into the approach that we've actually taken in Mersey Care and the future of what's also available in terms of further learning resources as well. So next slide, please, Kristina. Thank you. So actually, it's not often I say this, but today I'm telling you, last week we actually took over, acquired another organisation. So this slide is actually slightly out of date. So I will talk about our new numbers. We now have a workforce of 12,000 staff. So we have a really large geographical catchment area and just under 1,000 beds now, with a turnover over 600 million. I think what's really important to highlight, we specialise in community and mental health, and that's from mild to moderate mental health to the more complex mental health. And in that vein, we host one of the 3 high secure hospitals in the UK. And this is where we have patients who are vulnerable both from the self perspective, but also vulnerable from other people's perspective. And we do also offer physical community health services as well. So as you can imagine, it's been a very pressing time for us during the pandemic and during the COVID period, keeping our staff safe, but also keeping our populations and our communities safe as they deal with, as we deal with things that we were being exposed to, never experienced before, but also we've seen surges in demand increase for some of our mental health services, which is anticipated, I believe, due to the COVID pandemic. Next slide, please. And I think I'm just going to hand over to you, Kristina. Yeah. Is that okay? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So just based on what Amanda said there, and what we do with a lot at Northumbria and Mersey Care is looking at what is a just culture or what is a restorative just culture, which forms the basis of the work that Mersey Care does and the work that we also do with them. So just culture, the kind of definition that we put up here is very important that people understand what a definition is and what it means. So there'll be many times in all industries, not just health, but health, of course, is particularly prevalent, where things will not go according to plan. So there could be damage to patients, to customers, to staff, to organisation, but we know very much that this is not, it's very rarely, you know, through malice or intent that this happens. So a restorative just culture, especially when things go wrong, is about repairing and building the trust. So when relationships, when, you know, they could kind of go down a different path, we make sure that we deal with this with empathy and compassion. So for organisations, especially Mersey Care and a lot of other organisations in not just the health industry, but aviation and many others, education start to do this as well. There's a real move now and an awareness away from a culture of fear and a culture of blame, and a focus on who has done something, as that's the old way of managing things, but more towards a much more humane organisational culture which repairs and builds trusts, but is very much about learning and accountability as well. So it's really, really important. And we always say this with any kind of learning or program that we do, that if your organisation is going to embark on a just culture, because just cultures can be either retributive still, where we mete out kind of still punishment because we think that's just, or it can be restorative, where it's about repair and trust and learning. It's really important that we understand that, because that definition will mean that you have to align your policies, your processes, your systems, and quite often an organisation will have to turn them upside down. So for any organisation embarking on this, you have to ask yourself, what does a just culture mean to me, and what does it mean for my organisation? So a really key point of the difference between them. Just to expand on that a bit as well, and some of you might be familiar with this, so very much a lot of the training and the learning that we do, and the kind of the story of Mersey Care itself, was based on what a culture looks like when it's in retribution and how that moves forward to restoration. And there's some really key points that come out about the learning here. So retribution, a lot of you might be familiar with this. So the old way of doing things are what we call the old way, and for some, it might be the current way, but it really focuses on the blame and the who. So it looks at which rule is broken, who did it. It will ask how bad the breach is, how bad this person failed. And then it will also really focus on what the consequences should be. So what has that person done? How bad did they do it? What should we do to them? And as we know, many times, this will kind of result in a suspension or some kind of formal action that goes to disciplinary, which can be really harmful and detrimental to not only the individual, but the organisation as well. There are a lot of studies in the literature now that will show us, and we'll probably know from our own experience, you know, without kind of looking to the studies that have been published, but retribution is now noted for the fact that it's very counterproductive for any organisation learning, any personal learning. It goes against teamwork, so it makes teams dysfunctional. There's a real lack of humanity and compassion and forgiveness. And there is a lack of healing and trust, and people just end up more hurt than the situation that has landed them there in the first place. If you have a look at restoration, so we can see whereas the questions on retribution were very much focused on the who, the restoration is very much about, or what rule is broken is who is hurt. So not who is to blame, but who is hurt. And this will often involve the person who has been involved in the incident, and even the patient and the wider team as well. What are their needs? So in this restorative process, we'll consider everybody's needs, the person who has maybe kind of acted in the incident and those who have been hurt. Whose obligation would it to be meet those needs, and how can we involve the community and be counterproductive? But the real key thing about the difference of the questions there is that you start to get a lot more organisational learning that comes out. So with retribution, we have something that's happened, we have a person, and we look to blame them. With restoration, where we use moral engagement, emotional healing and engagement, then it means that all of the system failings and issues that caused this person to be in that situation in the first place, they all come out, and that organisational learning is massively important as part of the restorative process that this culture now adopts. Amanda.
It's always the way, isn't it? You start off on mute. So thanks for that, Kristina. So just asking colleagues to reflect on what Kristina says, and please share in the chat box. I want to ask you 2 questions. One, have you ever made a mistake in work? And simple yes, no, never would be really helpful to share in the chat. So have you ever made a mistake in work? Is question number 1. Question number 2 is, how did that make you feel? So when that mistake had been made, and people are great sharing, thank you. It's glad to know that Kristina and I are in great company. We've made plenty of mistakes too, but how did that make you feel? How did you feel when you made that mistake? So just while we're reflecting on that, because I'll come back to that as we move through the presentation, very, very quickly, within the NHS context, patient safety and staff safety, staff health and well-being, patient outcomes and experiences go hand in hand, really. And what key documents within the NHS are articulating in a very simple fashion is, if you want the best patient safety culture, so in any business, whatever your gravitational pull is, whether it's a commercial enterprise, a retail aspect, or anything that involves any element of safety, to create the optimum safety culture, your staff have to feel safe first. And our people plan in the NHS talks very much about belonging to the NHS. How do you get that sense of belonging? And fundamentally, that sense of belonging comes from feeling psychologically safe and being able to be your true person in work. And we would very much argue that the embodiment of restorative principles within your culture of your organisation is fundamental to staff psychological safety, both at an individual level, but also at that team and organisational level. Next slide, please. And this is a slide that's really pertinent in the NHS. My organisation, Mersey Care, hosts something called the Zero Suicide Alliance. And what that Zero Suicide Alliance articulates is 1 death by suicide is far too many. And again, Joy, I'd encourage members to actually take this free Zero Suicide Alliance training that you can share. There's a website and Twitter account, and we can share all of those with you. And really poignant for us, I think, in the space of the pandemic, about how we look after people's physical and mental well-being, but also how we have conversations, sometimes very difficult conversations with loved ones and family members. And this gentleman, Amin, was a nurse in the NHS, and he sadly died by suicide. And the picture that you can see in front of you was he actually set fire to himself outside a building in London following his disciplinary and his dismissal from an NHS organisation. I think it's absolutely critical, really, really critical to think that sometimes the policies and practices that we put in place to actually support our people do hurt our people. What we know in the NHS is our healthcare workers have a higher rate of suicidal ideation and more likely to die by suicide than the average population. And certainly in my professional body, the CIPD, we've seen articles in the past articulate that sometimes HR processes have caused loved ones, as they go through them, actually experiencing suicidal ideation, or at worst, dying by suicide. And that's something nobody we love or care about should have to face. So we have to think about the policies, the processes, and the SOPs that we put in place, how they actually look after our people in the most difficult times. And the approach that we've been talking about is how you prevent even going there, how you make sure you wrap around and you think about kindness and compassion in the embodiment of your policies and processes, and how they're enacted and applied, which really then embodies the culture of your organisation. Next slide, please. And I think for me, we talk about in Mersey Care, I do love this visual slide, is You talk about culture, and we've all heard the quote, about a culture eats strategy for breakfast or lunch, whatever it is. But actually, what you think you see about culture only touches the iceberg. There's a whole lot of other things going on underneath that iceberg that can tease out or test the culture. And actually, when staff's resilience is really at a pushing point, that's often when true culture comes to the service. So when we asked our staff about delivering the best optimum patient care, what do they need to have the best optimum of patient care, they told us that they wanted to work in a safe place. They told us they wanted to be felt they were treated fairly and compassionately when something didn't go to plan or as experienced. And I'm using that language deliberately. I'm not using the language of mistake when something went wrong. Because when you ask somebody if they've made a mistake, that automatically generates a reaction, and a fear reaction often. Whereas if you ask somebody, did something didn't go as planned or as they expected to go, that has different connotations for safety. Our staff wanted a BHAG, and in Mersey Care, we use BHAGs. And for those of you who wonder what that term stands for, it's big, hairy, audacious goals. And those goals have to be stretching enough that they're within potential grasp, but we can't actually get there, because that actually challenges our mindset and our thinking to say how we're going to aspire and what we're going to do differently to deliver that. So our staff asked for that fair, compassionate culture. And for us, just culture at a very simple level is about fairness. It's about learning, and it's about accountability. And through that organically growing within the organisation and that ask, our just and learning culture was born. Next slide, please, Kristina. And I think we have an ambition in Mersey Care, and it's an ambition to aspire to deliver perfect care. We know we don't deliver perfect care for everybody, but it is an aspiration. It's a mindset shift. We know in a lot of organisations, the error and rate for margin is quite small. It's 0.0 of something. Yet in health, the margin forever has a far bigger proportion. And what we were saying to ourselves, if it was our loved one, if it was somebody we know, we care about, we want that care to be as perfect as possible. But our staff were telling us they could only achieve that perfect care as possible and aspire to that if they felt that culture was there to keep them safe, and it was non-punitive when a mistake occurred or something didn't go to plan. And if it did, that would be dealt with compassionately and fairly. We talk a lot about personal and professional accountability and learning, and certainly in our experience in the old retributional way, all we did was hold people to account personally. There was no organisational accountability or no organisational learning. At best, it was, Amanda, this is what you need to improve. This is what you need to learn, or this is what you need to acquire. Or Amanda, this is how we're going to punish you. We looked at correlation. So factor A harmed factor B, or factor A contributed the harm of B, not contribution. And what we know when there's an event or an incident, often it's a lot of contributory factors. You can't always attribute something to direct causation. So it's really thinking about that. It's not about being blame-free. So it's not having a no blame culture, because to us in a healthcare setting, that would be as intolerable as a blame culture. It's that careful balance, fairness, learning, and accountability. But it's about looking forward. Often, particularly, we all fall into that human trap of applying bias. So something occurs in a setting and you say, I wouldn't have done that because I would have followed the rules. But the reality is, neuroscience tells us we can only tend to, remember at best 12 to 15 facts, and that's on a good day. Yet all these policies and procedures that we have in a healthcare setting and in many other industries actually means that how able are we to enact those policies in a tense moment, in a moment when pressure is on and requires immediate decision making and thinking. So we need to really reflect on that. And fundamentally, it asks what and how, not who, because a bad system will always win over a good person. Next click, please, Kristina. And what Sidney Decker's research does, which is the research we really embodied in Mersey Care, is he asks you, don't just look at the areas of which you mistakes have occurred or things haven't gone to plan or as expected. Look at all those wonderful surprises and all the things that go right within your organisation, because actually you get more learning from that. But we always tend to look when there's been a problem or an issue or an incident, and that's not helpful for our staff, our well-being, our safety, our creativity, our ability to innovate and improve. Next slide, please. And I think I wanted to share with you, I must emphasize, restorative just culture is not just about HR, it's about everything. It touches complaints, it touches, quality measures, it touches financial resourcing, it touches economic viability, it touches everything. But I'm just sharing with you our first pilot. We introduced restorative just cultural practices into HR in 2016. And as a direct consequence of piloting it in 2 areas, we immediately saw disciplinary investigations and suspensions reduce in 2 of our clinical divisions. Could you just click on the next bullet point, please, Kristina? And what we've seen was that reduction in disciplinaries and a reductions in suspensions. Next slide, if that's okay, please. And for me, this is really important. Last year, we had 8,000 staff. In 2016, we had 3,500 staff. So despite the fact our workforce has increased by over 135% in that period, our investigations, our formal disciplinary investigations have decreased by 79%, and our suspensions have decreased by 86%. There's a financial price tag to that, but quite frankly, that's a bit of information and a bit of data that we do look at and share, but I'm not interested in that really. What I'm interested in, behind every one of those blocks, there's people, there's a person, there's a team watching how you support somebody through a process or you hurt somebody through a process. There's their family members, their loved ones who are watching the pain unfold. We say in HR that an investigation is without prejudice. You ask any staff member who goes through an investigation, it does not feel like without prejudice to them. You've got things like the rumour mill, no smoke without fire. Do you know that, Amanda? That happened to that Amanda. It hurts. It really, really hurts. And I think we have a moral obligation, an ethical obligation, as well as every obligation going to make sure that our people are centre to how we look after them when things don't go to plan or as expected. Next slide, please. And I think it's important as we articulate what we see within the NHS, we do something called an NHS staff survey, that even though we've acquired organisations, and some organisations we've acquired have been in difficult places. In fact, our former Liverpool Community Health organisation that we acquired at the beginning of the financial year in 2018, what we seen in that organisation was it's described by an external inquiry report as that organisation was a toxic organisation. That's how they described it. But actually, on acquisition, on supporting, on looking after them differently, with different leadership and with our restorative practices at its core, we've seen their performance accelerate and improve. We see massive improvements to quality indicators, same staff, same teams, just different leadership. Next slide, please. And we have an approach and methodology in Mersey Care, and that's called our 4-step process. And for us, this is our framework. It's how we look at triggers, how we look at events, what we need to go through, and that's to avoid hindsight bias. And it's also to ensure consistency and sustainability and application. And what's very important is this isn't something that's in a darkened room in HR. It's been co-produced with our staff side colleagues, co-produced with our operational managers, using expertise from Northumbria University, and our practical experience of applying this in practice. And this has been really, we found it really instrumental and really helpful in terms of moving forward. And what we've also found behaviourally, we found it helpful in terms of addressing some of the cultural issues with attitudes and how they play out, in holding people to account for them when previously we might not have done so without the framework. Next slide, please. And I think for me, This embodies the principle of restorative just culture. Often we design structures, systems, and processes, and we design it from a position of power. Yeah, and that is a leadership power. It could be a white privilege power. We design something with what we think we know, or what we believe we know consciously. We might not be aware of our unconscious bias. How do we enact with the people who use those SOPs in application? And in my experience, the design and the experience often are at different places. And the closer you can align the user experience with the design, you create better safety. Because what happens if the design doesn't work in practice, our users find ways to navigate around that design, and that becomes work as done. And us people then, sometimes in a hierarchical position, imagine the work is done as per their design. But if people don't feel safe to tell us our design doesn't work in practice, they find their own ways to navigate around the design. And that could be a safety risk that we don't even know about. And then we judge them on the design, not what's been happening in practice. And that practice may have been occurring for years. Next slide, please. And this for me is a really powerful slide. And if colleagues have watched the Just Culture movie, I know you have, Joy, so you might recognize one of the ladies in here. Panchu, the gentleman with the red tie, is our director of patient safety. And next to him is a lady called Denise. And Denise shared her experience on the film of the pain that occurred to her when she was going through an investigation, even at the end point of when that investigation was no case to answer. And I think we had a review, a learning review following a suicide, a very sad event for any clinical team. I think what we experience now is something very different. So to have a member of staff who've been through an experience that caused them such pain and hurt in our old way of doing things in Mersey Care to the new way, and even though it's a difficult thing to discuss, a difficult thing to learn from, to say they felt safe in that learning and reflection is very, very powerful of the cultural change. Next slide, please. And this is what I was saying before. To systemize restorative approaches means that you have to learn from everyday occurrences. So how as a team do you learn? Do you talk about things? Do you create that psychological safety? Do you create that embodiment of having conversations around things that are going really well, rather than just having conversations about unwanted outcomes? Because that creates a safety infrastructure within that team. And often we hear that how you view an organisation often is centred from the team that you work in. And if you feel you belong in that team and you feel your true self within that team, clarity of purpose, clarity of objectives, and clarity of aspirations in terms of outcomes. Next one, please. Now, for me, I get asked an awful lot, Amanda, if you were starting this journey, we're in year 6, I can't quite believe I'm saying that. If you were starting this journey again, what would you do differently? And it's this: I'd start from a place of civility and respect, minus trying to get rid of incivility and disrespect. In Mersey Care, we had a value of respect. We deep dived into that value and we came up upon civility and respect. And we were very much influenced by the work of Dr. Chris Turner, who's an intensivist, a medic within an NHS trust. And he founded a campaign alongside other colleagues called Civility Saves Lives. And we very much looked at that work and used that work to influence and deep dive into our value of respect. Next slide, please. And a top tip is Dr. Chris Turner does a fab TED talk on incivility. So if you haven't seen that, just Google Dr. Chris Turner and you can watch that TED talk. Next slide, please, Kristina. And this is some facts that research has showed us. When somebody is rude, and I'm not going to say when somebody is just rude, the impact of rudeness on your cognitive ability to function is huge. It makes between a 50 to 60% difference. And we can even see in a healthcare setting, 50% of people are more likely to make a medication error or a calculation error when calculating drugs if somebody is rude to them. So I'm not talking about bullying here. I'm talking about incivility, rudeness. Before bullying, that comes before bullying. And in my experience, if that's left to fester and not dealt with earlier, then it becomes a thing. And that's what we've certainly experienced in Mersey Care, the impact of starting to encourage colleagues to speak up and have conversations about the impact of incivility and disrespect versus being respectful and civil. Next slide, please. So we have a campaign in Mersey Care, really simple. It's called I Will Speak Up. And what we're doing is encouraging people, if they see something, they raise it and say, Amanda, the way you communicated then actually hurt my feelings, or I didn't think that was the best way in which you communicated, or when you communicated like that, this is how I received that message. And what my reflection is, if your staff aren't saying to you that you could improve in some way, or you had an impact in some way, even if it wasn't intended, it's not that you didn't have that impact, because let's be honest, we've all said none of us are perfect. It's just that they don't feel safe in feeding it back and telling you. So if somebody isn't telling me how I could be better every week, it's not because I'm a brilliant leader. It's because they don't feel safe that they're telling me that they can't tell me. So they just choose not to tell me. And the reason why we've had confidence in this campaign is in our staff survey data, of which 270 trusts take part, we ask a question is, when you last experienced harassment and bullying, did you feel safe to talk about it and raise it? And last year we were the first, and as those 270 trusts this year, we were the second. That staff, if they saw it, they felt safe enough to say it and raise it. And that's what that articulates. Next slide, please. And I'm going to quickly go through these two slides. Basically, all these slides are doing is using our staff networks and our staff engagement groups. Our staff have given examples of the behaviours that they want to experience within Mersey Care. And the next slide is the behaviours that they don't want to see. And we encourage line managers to talk about this at teams, about to reflect on how you work better to show more behaviours in the green and remove the behaviours in the red zone. And at this moment, we're re-looking at those behaviours in light of our experience of COVID to make sure we really signpost those microaggressions that exist in behaviours. And so we're really being explicit about telling what they are, because I think we've had a new reflection on that in light of Black Lives Matter, in light of the dialogue and the experience of COVID and the disparities that have been experienced. And I think people are more ready to actually own that space and really look at that deeply through those microaggressions and white privilege lenses. Next slide, please. And we use a bit of fun in this campaign. So there's a National Bullying Week, as we know the schools system lead that. We encourage clinical staff and corporate staff to come in with odd socks, you know, showcase what they're doing, talk about speaking up. And it's just a bit of a fun way, an anti-bullying week, to raise the momentum of it. And something that we focused on this year is a campaign it's not just I will speak up. It's when somebody speaks up that we listen up and we follow up. So our campaign this year is I will speak up, I will follow up, I will listen up, I will follow up. And that's been very important. That's very come through our BAME network, because what they've told us, they've had a lot greater confidence in the last months about speaking up and raising concerns, but sometimes colleagues don't feel able to hear it and listen to it and agree what that follow-up action is. So that's a campaign we've embarking on this year and we're looking at. Next slide, please. Back to Kristina, if I may.
Thanks, Amanda. So even from, especially what Amanda said in Mersey Care's journey so far, I'm sure you can all kind of tell the wealth of learning that's come out, especially from their journey. And Amanda mentioned they piloted Restorative Just Culture in 2016, but the learning started before that in 2014 when they started to explore this. So there are a wealth of resources to capture all of that learning that have now come out of Mersey Care's journey. The links that we put on the screen in front of you, so these are free links widely available. So you will see that first of all, there's modules 1 to 4. So these modules, and we encourage you to download the links and to use them. These are a part of a suite of e-learning modules that Mersey Care created based on their experience that are directly linked to the teachings of Restorative Just Culture. So number 1 gives a new way of caring, so that introduces the concepts and the principles of a Restorative Just Culture. Number 2 is kind of a touch in for HR or HR practitioners, as in how HR and managing employee relations should be approached from a Restorative Just Culture concept or principle. Number 3, very important, what every board should know, there is a massive part for everybody to play in the organisation, but in particular exec level and boards have a real integral part to play. And number 4 is very much linked to what Amanda just talked about there, the respect and civility awareness. So that goes through, I will speak up, I will listen up, I will follow up, and what organisations should know. So with all of those, they'll be available after the presentation. They are widely to be used. You can use them as training within your own organisations for your own employees, you know, freely available. We really encourage you to use them. The last one there is the Northumbria University 4-day restorative culture training. So the all of the learning that came from Mersey Care's journey has now been put into an evidence-based programme, and that is a 4-day programme that is jointly delivered by Mersey Care and Northumbria. And we incorporate those e-learning modules, but what that really does is gives a 4-day training to people in the organisation, whether it's patient safety specialists, clinicians, OD, HR, exec level, and goes through all of the tools that Amanda has just showed you. So the 4-step process, civility respect puzzle, and there are a lot of other tools that we use in there. We touch very much on psychological safety and how that can be developed and encouraged in teams as well. So please make use of those links. In all of this though, there is a real kind of practical aspect as to the benefits of what is an organisation going to get out of this. So why should you embark on a restorative just culture? Well, of course, I suppose the most easiest obvious answer is that it's the right thing to do, treating people fairly, treating them with compassion. When somebody has ended up in a circumstance that is beyond their control because of system issue or failings, why would we try and deal with them in such a punitive way? And there is a conference paper that Mersey Care have published on their results and benefits of their journey so far. But if we are going to look at a restorative just culture, there are lots of intrinsic humane benefits that will lead to or be as a result of this. So reduction in violence and assaults, reduction in bullying and harassment cases, reduction in work-related pressure and an increase in support and compassion, which leads to a reduction in absenteeism for organisations. There is an increase in self-reported measures of good health and well-being. You will find that there is an increase in team psychological safety, which leads to an increase in incident reporting, of course, because people feel safe to speak up. But because of people speaking up, that leads to the learning as well. So the number of incidents and adverse events that actually happen or take place will reduce. And all of that leads to an increase in high-performing teams in our organisations, which again is very strong on the evidence base that comes through Mersey Care, and an increase in employee team and organisational learning, which is really important because we constantly, you'll hear from both of us talk about the learning that comes through. As Amanda said, there are a lot of economic benefits of this as well, which have, as I've mentioned before, have been published. And again, I really implore you to read that paper that was published on Mersey Care. But, you know, there are a range of audiences that need to be persuaded. So there will be a reduction in suspension costs, disciplinary costs, legal termination expenses, overall salary costs. But of course, all of this is leading to an increase in service, whatever service you might be in, whichever industry. If it is the health industry, then of course an increase in patient safety efficiency. And all of that will lead to an overall increase in organisation efficiency. So as Amanda said, it's more on the humane and the social benefits, of course, that we want to get you. But for the most avid of resistance, then the economic benefits are there too. So how do we sum up the restorative just culture approach? So really at Mersey Care, and not just at Mersey Care, you know, the organisations, there's lots of trusts now that we deliver this training and this learning to. And to really summarise what or encapsulate the approach, it very much focuses on concept into practice. So, you know, I've mentioned before about the evidence base. This isn't hyperbole or talking about theory or talking about another culture change. It's really practical application of these concepts to make the organisation a better place and to support people to come to work. It's very much underpinned with operational and excellence and support. So you remember Amanda said this is not HR. If any of you get the chance to do our 4-day programme, you will see that HR actually comes at the back of, even on the 4th day it comes in on, before that there is such a wealth of OD operations that we go through which are really linked to a just culture. It very much halts judgments and instead ask why people behave in the way that they do. What is leading? What is contributing? What's happening in the organisation that is landing people in these positions where they clearly wouldn't choose to be in? Transparency is massively important, and we all know, and I probably think we've all worked in organisations where the default action can be, or the reaction can be, the armour comes on, that defence mechanism. So the more transparent we are, the more open we are, the faster we accelerate this process. It's very much a culture that allows the boss to hear the bad news, and you'll hear that we've talked about psychological safety on this call. When we do the training and the learning for this programme, and Mersey here do a massive amount of work with psychological safety. Our staff have to feel safe to speak up, but they also have to know that when they're going to speak up, they will be listened up and they will not be punished for speaking up. And again, the more psychological safety we have, the more we become a learning organisation. Co-production, this is a really, really important point, and not just for staff side. We put staff side on there because when it comes to more the employee relations side, staff side will be imperative in this process. It's massively important that any organisation is going to take their unions on this journey with them, because they bring another perspective and they're going to bring your workforce on board. But it's very important that people don't resort to going away to ivory towers and coming up with more policies and procedures. And this has to be a co-production, not just with staff side, with the rest of the organisation. And we know from the literature that it will tell us that if we are going to have an organisation where people will buy into this culture and come on board with it, the way that we do that is through co-production. Just go away and kind of, dream it up or write it up and go and deliver it to them instead of with them. They'll just switch off in a much faster way. So we're moving to learning from our routine work. You remember Amanda talked about what goes right. If anybody is familiar with the concepts of patient safety 1 and 2, patient safety 1 focuses on what went wrong. Patient safety 2 is very much, okay, what goes right? Where and how and when does it go right? Why don't we take the lessons from there? So that's massively important for a just culture. And we understand the distinction between resources and being resourcefulness, because the latter takes a long way. So remember, our resources are always limited, but the more resourceful we are, if we're going to have a restorative just culture, the evidence will tell us that what we start to do is kind of front load our processes so we don't end up with lengthy suspensions, disciplinaries, absenteeisms. So all of that work is taken away. So it allows us to be much more resourceful. Our people are definitely the solution, not the problem. It is amazing if you look at the history of organisations and their policies and processes, virtually all of them are put there to protect the organisation, but not the people themselves. So it takes a real shift and a mindset of that. And sharing vulnerability is massively, massively important. If we're going to do any of this from kind of the exec, senior exec, right to team leaders, modelling fallibility is so, so important, because once we start to do that and share our vulnerabilities, people will start to see that it's okay to do that and they'll start to trust us, which builds that relationship as well. So how do you do it? What does it look like? We often get asked this a lot of times by organisations, because a lot of time organisations will know that they need to change, and they'll know that the culture needs to change, but they're not sure how to get there or what that even looks like. So it really starts with an in-depth discovery process to find out what's healthy in your organisation, patient safety 2, what's going right. But of course, we also have to be able to look at what isn't working as well. And again, very much we use our data to do that. But there are a set of questions even at the beginning that we can start to ask ourselves. So what is a just culture going to mean for you? So we talked at the very beginning, you have to know what it is. You have to know the definition, because that definition, even from a sentence, is going to turn upside down your policies and your processes that now need to align to a restorative just culture, if that's what you intend to do. What is it that stops your employees doing the best job that they can do in your organisation? And this is where we start the discovery process, and something that Mersey Care did to find out what was going wrong in their organisation. What is it? Listen to your employees, they will tell you. Once you know what's going wrong, you can start to put it right. Which policies do you need to declutter and to re-engage? You know, at what point do we stop being frightened of legislation and actually kind of pull the legislation out and think, right, if we have a restorative process or policy, would that actually align with the legislation and keep us in check? And quite often you'll find that that is the case. Which process and systems are causing the most harm? Which one do you need to change? Remember, the quickest way to build up trust is to build an evidence base. And the faster that your workforce see that you've changed harmful policies and you're putting them into practice rather than talking about it, it will build up that evidence base, and it starts to do that repair work within the organisation for you. If you really, really believe that people come to work to make a difference and you want to empower people, then what needs to change in your organisation to allow this to happen? So it's a real kind of reflection on what do we need to change? How do we empower people? What has stopped us from doing that before? And Amanda's touched on this already. Does your current culture see the people as the problem or the solution? So once we change that mindset and spin ourselves round, it's a different perspective that brings in all sorts of creativity, all sorts of innovation, and all sorts of ideas for how we can move the organisation forward. And which data sets do you need to use to tell you what isn't working? So again, very important. This is a big part of the programme that we do. You will know your organisation best, of course you will, but you need to work with your ER data, OD data, conversations, your finance data, employee engagement data, employee effectiveness, whether that's staff surveys, pulse surveys, massively important, because your data will guide you to what is working and what isn't working in the organisation, and it takes that guesswork out for you. And I suppose finally, it really is about asking yourself, who do you want to be as leaders and as an organisation? So is it one of retribution? Is it one of fear and blame with the limited effectiveness and where people are even scared to come and do their job? Or is it one of restorative justice where employees feel supported to do their best job, where they feel psychologically safe? And as a result of that, they feel more excited and motivated to come to work, which is exactly the case and the evidence base that happened at Mersey Care. So on that note, everybody, from Amanda and myself, thank you very, very much. You'll see that we put the links on there and our own details. Amanda, anything to add in conclusion?
Thanks, Kristina. I think I'd just like to say this is the most personal and professional and powerful journey I've ever been on. When I think of the HR director that I always thought I was the people person. And I always believed I did everything with that moral and ethical component of being the moral compass of the organisation. Now I reflect back and think I was far too rigid and defensive in some of my views. So I think the exposure that we've done, I'm hoping gives people the ability to feel safe in revealing what the experiences are like for your people. And if you own that space, if you lean into that vulnerability, if you look at really optimizing that psychological safety for your workforce, and that creates an element of hoping that you feel psychologically safe yourself. So your board commitment is absolutely critical and fundamental in that space. Then actually the journey that you're going to go on is going to be an amazing one. I would also emphasize that we're certainly far from perfect now. Things still don't go to plan or as expected within Mersey Care, but I think our reflection is very different. We learn from it and we have open dialogue and conversations around it. And it's also a reality check that every time you get to that moment and you think, hallelujah, how wonderful is this? Something just comes left of field and reminds you that you're not as good as what you thought you are. So it is a continuous journey, 2 steps forward, 1 back, 2 steps forward and 1 back. But the thing I can say wholeheartedly is for our staff, their experience improves every day. And that is because we're on that continuous journey. I know the experiences that happened yesterday we'll learn from and we'll make it better for the experiences for tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's really, really interesting and yeah, very inspirational. I think gives lots of food for thought. I have had a few questions about whether this has been recorded or whether the slides will be distributed. So we have been recording this. I will sort of edit it down to the main main event as such, and hopefully it'll be on our website later this week or possibly early next week, depending on how quick I can do that. And I will also email that link around to everyone who registered today, so you won't necessarily have to go searching for it on the website, just look out for an email. I'm just going to pop the Just Culture movie link as well in the chat, because a lot of people had asked about that. So question time. We don't have a lot of time, but we can have a short discussion now. We've had a few questions throughout. One of the questions came from Carmel, who said, when you say investigations and suspensions reduced, did the same number of events or incidents happen, but the fact finder did not lead to full investigations?
Yeah, in fact, we've seen simultaneously our reporting of incidents and events increased, but the impact on the harm of those events was significantly decreased, and that also led to a decrease in formal HR processes. So the learning occurred. There was far greater learning, far greater awareness raising, but less, if you like, formal action. Yeah.
And someone else, kind of on a similar note, someone else asked how it interfaces with the freedom to speak up process.
Yeah, great question. Within the NHS, we have a national freedom to speak up process. So we use that. Our freedom to speak up guardians are very much involved in this process. They're trained using our tools and techniques, and we have regular conversations to make sure that if staff members are going through a process, that they're being supported in the correct way. And when we conduct learning events, we do it with staff side HR operational managers, and we include our freedom to speak up guardians as well.
Great. There we had another question here, and I don't know if this is something that you've incorporated or not. Someone, I think Desmond, said, really keen to learn and hear more about how these principles can be applied in the response to violence, aggression, harm towards or against staff. So where the staff members are the ones being harmed by patients.
Yeah, we've done some of that in certain areas of our work in terms of restorative circles and conversations with patients who have harmed staff. It very much depends on a number of things: their mental capacity and the ability to have those conversations, and also the willingness to conversations of being clear about what's in their clear care plan. But we started off from the basis that before we could put our staff in that situation, we had to create the psychological safety within the organisation with our workforce. So as we're moving through this year, we're moving more towards restorative circles. That it's called. There's lots of evidence and literature. I can see somebody's put in about the Restorative Justice Council, and we've been working with partners in New Zealand who are very far advanced in restorative circles, and they've been learning it more from us from a workforce perspective. But our view in the organisation, and one we really hold firm on, is before you can get into restorative circles, that you should really make sure the restorative bit is for the people that you're going to put in that situation first, because it creates about an increase in their safety in doing so and their willingness to do so. So a space we're moving further into.
Yeah. We had another question asking, how do you introduce ideas like this to a traditional system? And I guess related to that as well, when you did start to introduce this at Mersey Care, was there resistance? You know, obviously this comes counter to maybe the traditional HR policies. Can you speak on that? How do you overcome that?
Yeah. Oh, so much resistance at different levels. So I think our staff side colleagues and partners were key to this. I must emphasise that there was resilience, and it was different for different people. Some HR practitioners didn't like the new way. They were very much embodied in the old way. In terms of, if you watch Line of Duty, you know, that sort of interrogation, investigation sort of process. They're very quick to jump to formal investigation, and that's the way. In terms of our profession, I think many years ago supported our education. And, you know, in terms of some of the guiding around employee relations, you know, I remember being trained and them telling me if an employee lies to you, the employer-employee relationship is untenable. And I think that's quite a naive statement now, because actually, if they lie to you, you need to ask why they're lying. And it's often because, you know, the bit Kristina talked about, there was a lack of trust. and it goes back to a lack of psychological safety. So I can see somebody has mentioned about the work of Amy Edmondson. Absolutely, we are a big fan of her work, and we're just in the process, as Kristina will tell you, of writing a book about our experiences with Professor Deckner, myself, and the Chief Exec, and Amy is co-authoring one of those chapters with Sydney within the book. So we're sharing the experience of restorative approaches from a regulatory perspective, from a provider perspective, from, if you like, a just culture expert perspective, and other experts like Amy Edmondson, and also patients who've experienced harm to their loved ones on a major scale.
Yeah. There was a question about the fact-finding process, and Stephanie was asking, is that structured or guided with a particular process, or is it undertaken individually depending on the manager?
We have a framework, so we have a methodology. It's the 4-step framework I alluded to, and managers, staff side, HR are privy to that, they're trained in that. And it's completely transparent. So if a member of staff is going to go through a process, they're absolutely aware about what questions will be asked, because we're totally transparent in that process.
Yeah, that's great. I think we don't have a lot of time left, but Julia asked, what support have you had from your CCG? Is that clinical commissioning group? Is that not all hot on the NHS lingo? In terms of reporting differently or focusing on safety 2 or restorative practice?
I think for us, particularly due to some of the organisations we acquired, we had a lot of focus in on us in terms of what the approach was, and we've had really great feedback. We didn't overtly go out and ask permission because we piloted an approach to see if it worked originally in our secure services, and as we've moved through that, we've developed tools and techniques and methodologies. And lucky enough for us, we've been able to work alongside the pioneer Sydney Decker and other colleagues in that development, and we've had that blended of theory, the academia, as well as the practical experience and application, because often that's where you get a bit fuzzy, and that's where certainly we struggled, and we've experienced lots of where we've scraped our elbows and bumped our knees, if I say it like that, and the training program that we deliver both shares those tools and techniques and trains people on them, but also hopefully accelerates the implementation by sharing some of the common pitfalls we got into, because we weren't aware at that stage fully what we were doing. We were learning as we were
implementing. Yeah. Great. Well, I think that's most of the questions, and we are running out of time as well. A few things before we go. I should have mentioned at the start that if you want to find out more information about the Mint House, what it is that we do, our future events, unfortunately we can't just send you emails based on your registration today because of the UK data protection legislation. So we need you to opt in proactively, which is a little bit more of a hassle, but if you do want to continue to hear from us, please do send me an email. I'm just going to put my email address in the chat and just say, please add me to your list. And we will send emails probably about once a month maximum, I would say, probably every other month. So that way you can find out about our latest events. We don't currently have any other events scheduled, although we have many in the pipeline. So you want to get on that list to hear the latest when kind of dates are set and things like that. The other thing is a bit of an ask. So this event today is free of charge. We're a charity. We just want to spread the word about restorative practice, really equip people, support people in that. But if you just want to give a really small donation, like £2, £5 voluntarily towards it, you can do so on our website just to help us cover some of our costs. Like I said, there's obviously been no registration fee, but if you'd like to do that, the link is there. And generally, you can look at our website at what we're doing in terms of promoting restorative practice, restorative justice. I've also put that link in the chat. So yeah, really thanks again so much to Amanda and to Kristina. I don't know if there's anything else that you'd like to add before we go, but just really want to say thank you from all of us.
No, and I can see I know some people on the group chat on the chat, blast from the past, a few people on there. So hi to all those colleagues I've worked with previously. Great to see you today. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, and thanks again to everyone for attending, and thank you for all of your contributions in the chat, your comments and your questions. We really appreciate it. So yeah, I guess we'll sign off now. But yeah, like I said, look out for that email link to the recording that will be coming, and we hope to see you again. Thanks, everyone.